Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dawn Jeffries, and I am going to take my mask off and invite our panelists to do the same as just a reminder that we are all in our own spaces and practicing all of the public health safety guidelines as we get together for this webinar today. Again, I'm Dawn Jeffries. I'll be moderating this President's Town Hall with Virginia Tech President Tim Sands. Thank you for joining us, President Sands. This session is being recorded and it will be available when we finish as well. Also joining us today are Vice Provost for Undergraduate Academic Affairs, Dr. Rachel Holloway, as well as Vice President for Student Affairs, Frank Shushok. This afternoon, we'll discuss a number of topics today related to the pandemic, including how we're doing, where we are, commencement certainly, and the fall semester. President Sands, let's start with you. Can you just tell us where things stand, where we are, how things are looking?
Sure, thanks, Dawn, and good afternoon, everyone. It's kind of a dreary day in Blacksburg, but spring is definitely in the air. Things are turning in a good direction, and I'd like to share a little bit about where we are and where we're headed. After a year of learning to manage COVID, we're finally at a point where we can expect things to move in a more positive direction along with the weather. But the last thing we want to do is celebrate before we cross the finish line. We have an opportunity today to talk about where we are and where we're going. And there is some good news on in the near future. And also recent days have brought some reason for optimism. Just yesterday, the governor revised his restriction for commencement, which to summarize, it gives us a capacity of 5,000 in Lane Stadium. So this is welcome news. It gives us an opportunity to hold in-person events. And if we can keep the recent trends with their momentum, the momentum they have right now, we will be able to do so, to honor our 2021 graduates in person. We're working with students as well as the college deans to finalize plans for those in-person ceremonies that will align with the governor's directives and for our public health and with our public health guidance. So over the coming days and weeks, we'll share detailed information with our graduates and their families so that you know how to engage in person and also virtually. I think there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. We didn't know what that level would be. So we're trying to tune our planning to that 5,000 limit and also thinking logistically to make sure that we're doing it in a safe manner. So stay tuned. We will be sharing those details shortly. So while we were still making plans for the summer and the fall, we are also optimistic that we are going to have an in-person fall semester. Rachel Holloway and Frank Shushok have joined me so that they can talk about that in some detail. But before we get into that, I wanted to share a little bit about where we are right now. Now, how are we doing and how are we going to successfully complete this semester together? And the overall message is we are in a good place, but we must remain vigilant. You know, all it takes is a brief lapse in discipline and attention to our public health guidelines to trigger a big setback. There's another prominent university, there's more than one, but one in particular that we've been following that has done an incredibly good job of managing COVID throughout the academic year, but has had a recent surge of cases primarily due to unmasked gatherings. And they're currently under a campus-wide stay-in-place order. And they have said that if conditions don't improve, they might threaten the ability to complete the semester in person, and it might threaten commencement. So we do not want to be in that place. Our current situation, while improving, is fragile. So I want everybody to keep that in mind. There are a lot of unknowns out there, but I also want to thank everyone for being vigilant and being incredibly essentially attentive to the public health guidelines. And it's not everyone, but most of our students, faculty and staff, more than most, probably almost all, have been really careful over the last several weeks. And that's resulted in a 7-day average of daily positive cases that's dropped nearly 80% from its peak on the last day of February. Back in the last day of February, we were averaging about 38 positive cases a day, and today it's 7. And that's a remarkable drop off. But again, it's fragile, and we have to protect it, and we have to continue to see that go down. It's still a relatively high level, 7 cases a day, but it's going in the right direction. Similarly, the 7-day average of positivity, which is the percentage of all COVID tests that come back positive, has dropped below 5%. That happened in the first week of March. And it's been below 2.5% for the past few days and is trending down. Again, fragile, but going in the right direction. And I also need to point out that that level is still at 2.5%, is still higher than we had before Thanksgiving break. So in some ways, we're repeating the fall experience. It's a little different, so we're optimistic we can maintain that momentum, but there's no guarantees. We have to stay on top of it. The number of students in on-campus quarantine and isolation has dropped from a peak of about 200 several weeks ago to about 60, which is also a great improvement. Still higher than we'd like, but more and more of you, more and more of our students are having the kind of experience that we all hoped for and expected, with the caveats that we're doing it in the pandemic. But quarantine and isolation is not fun. It's gotten better, but it's not fun. It's not where we want to be. And having fewer than 60 students right now in quarantine and isolation is a good sign. So we've come this far by working together, and because of your adherence to public health guidelines, we've also doubled our testing. We've improved quarantine and isolation and case management, and all that is working. So thank you for your vigilance and your patience. I also want to thank all of our employees with high contact job responsibilities who have taken the opportunity to be vaccinated, and employees who have continued working on site to provide core services, especially to our students during the pandemic. We couldn't have come this far without you, and we'll have a chance to celebrate later your incredible devotion to this institution. It's just, it's stunning. If you told me at the beginning of the pandemic, we would be having to keep up this hard work this long, I would have been very worried about whether we could handle it. And you have handled it, and you've handled each surge, and here we are in a good spot at the moment. So as I've said, it's certainly too early to celebrate, but we have great optimism, that things will improve in the near future if we remain vigilant now. So we will talk about the summer and the fall, and as long as we keep up the good work, we'll see a return to campus and hopefully a fully in-person experience. One thing, a caveat I would add, is we've learned some things along the way, and there are some things we can do better in terms of the campus experience using hybrid or virtual tools. But the ability to be in person when we want to be in person is where we all want to be. So that is the plan, and that's where we're headed. But really, again, it all depends on what we do now. I would say the next 2 or 3 weeks are going to be really critical. And I wanted to highlight a couple of practices that we've been engaged in that are particularly important. And we know this from experience, from data, that we must maintain. And one is our protecting your pod. And if you have a registered pod, you've already committed formally to that. But a lot of our students and even members of the community have identified pods informally. And it's important to protect your pod, to not expose the pod to COVID-19 to the degree you can control it. And I think that is working. It's definitely working, and we need to keep that up. The other practice that has evolved, and as we've learned more and more about the way COVID-19 spreads, is the degree to which we pay attention to the details when we are masking. We need well-fitted masks. We need multi-layer masks. And all that is very well understood. We've posted some videos, and our own Dr. Lindsay Marr has spoken about this in many venues. It is really important to wear your mask and to do it in a way that is protective and protects others. So thank you for you doing that so far, but really give some thought into how you can improve your mask behavior and your mask setup. And then the third one I want to mention is getting the vaccine when you are eligible. And although some groups are not eligible yet, including most of our students, there is an opportunity to register so that we can move quickly when that eligibility becomes a reality. So finally, just like to share and emphasize that we have to stay focused, to stay committed, and that will allow us to stay well. and we can bring Hokie Nation back together in person soon. So thank you, Don. I'll turn it over to you to lead our panel, and look forward to responding in more detail to the specific questions.
Yeah, thank you, President Sands. I think there's a lot to unpack there, and we'll get to more specifics about a lot of what you've mentioned. But I wanted to stay on this vigilance and the importance of vigilance for a little bit, because, and President Sands, feel free to add to this, but Frank, I wanted to ask you, we've been in this a year now, and people are tired. People want normalcy. And there is still some concern, as good as we're doing, there is still some concern about gatherings and fear over that, especially with the warmer weather right around the corner. Can you address that and some challenges, perhaps?
Sure, Don, I'm happy to do it. And you're absolutely right. This has been a long, long journey that we've been on. And if there's a phrase that we've used over and over again, is that we're all in this together. Our success comes together, and when we're not successful, that comes together. And I totally understand that people are fatigued, they're exhausted. This has been such a long journey. I like to use the metaphor of the fourth quarter of a football game. You can see victory in sight, but that victory can slip through your fingers if you're not really focused. I like to think of the time that one of my alma maters went into the fourth quarter down by 23 points, and they ended up winning. That's what we kind of focus that we have to have, because if we're careless, we could be in a situation like President Sands just talked about. So an example of that was yesterday. We had too many students who decided to gather in large volumes, and that really puts us all at risk. And so we just need people to sacrifice a little longer, stay in it. And I like to think of it this way. With the vaccine being distributed the way it is right now, there's absolutely no reason another single person needs to die from COVID-19. We just don't need to infect anybody else. So if we can sacrifice a little longer, stay committed to the common good, understand that our future is together, then we will end this game with victory and be really proud of ourselves. And I just want to conclude by saying, and I've said this throughout, most of our students have done exactly what they need to do. And if you haven't been, follow that model, because that is voting for the greater good. That is living into what our motto is making decisions that are for the common good. And so a little longer, sacrifice a little longer, and we will get there, and we will celebrate in a big way because of how successful we have been at complying with public health guidelines. We have a lot to be proud of, but don't give up, stay vigilant, stay committed.
Thank you, Frank. Speaking of celebrating, a lot of folks are talking about commencement and asking about commencement. President Sands, you touched on this a little bit earlier. The governor yesterday just announced in easing a bit of some of the restrictions in place. Can you talk about, I know you said that a lot of the details are being worked out, and the university has been trying to plan based on what those public health guidelines would be. But can you talk about what the intention is and what those in-person events might be able to look like, or what the goal is there?
Sure, thanks, Don. I'll say a little bit, but then maybe Rachel or Frank would like to add some additional thoughts. But we've been involved in these discussions since the beginning of the pandemic. How do we honor our graduates, and how do we do this virtually originally, because we couldn't do it in person, and now we've got this opportunity to do some things in person. In the last several weeks, a lot of planning, really dozens of people have been involved in planning, not knowing when or what those changes in the restrictions might be. First of all, we didn't know that they would happen. We heard that the governor was going to announce something on April 1st, then we heard it was going to be earlier, and we didn't know what that number, that is a big difference, whether it's 5,000 or 10,000 or 1,000. And so that message came in yesterday that it was 5,000. That gives us an opportunity to, over the next couple of days, to pick among the options that we had on the table and to make some concrete decisions and announcements. The main idea here, and we've polled students, a lot of this comes directly from you, from the students, is that there's a great interest in having the in-person opportunity. We have absolutely committed to having a May 14th virtual commencement like we did last May and like we did in the fall, which I think was really successful for a virtual event. But we all recognize that there's a great desire to celebrate this really important demarcation in a person's life with family and with friends. So we're looking at whether and how we can have guests invited. We're looking at how many different events we need to schedule, how many opportunities over the commencement period in order to accommodate those that want to graduate in person. We're looking at format, and we're talking with the deans right now about how the colleges will be involved. So a lot of things are up in the air, but are quickly falling into place. So we look forward. I wish I could say exactly what this is going to look like and say, here's where you go. But within the next several days, certainly the next couple of weeks, we will have very explicit guidelines and signups, and hopefully you'll know exactly what's planned for you. And then you'll have some choice if you're a graduating senior or a graduate student who's going to be conferred with a master's degree or a PhD or a professional doctorate. You will know what your options are, and you'll have an opportunity to do this in person.
Dr. Holloway, I just wanted to ask you, President Sands talked about how important it is for students, their desire to have this in-person celebration and recognition. Can you talk about, from your perspective and other faculty, about how important it is to honor our graduates?
We are right there with our graduates. One of the things that I always looked forward to each year was the time when we would all come together. Families would be there, the students would walk across the stage, we could see their development over the 4 years. So know that sense of wanting that moment of celebration is shared by the whole community. I hope we're going to be able to do more than we did last year. But again, we have to continue to think about how we best support the whole community. But I was gratified by so many creative responses that some of our families came up with and our students. And the one nice thing about technology is it allows people to participate from a long distance away. So I hope we continue to find ways to let more people be involved, even as we comply with and are honoring our very important work around the pandemic. But know your faculty want to put on the robes and the silly hats with you because it's really important to all of us.
I can add that probably the most important experience I ever had as a faculty member was hooding my PhD students. And you cannot do that virtually in an adequate fashion. And just the ability to celebrate with the undergrads as they pass through commencement and get their bachelor's degree is extraordinary feeling. Even if it's not hooding, it's you get to hopefully hear their name called, see them celebrate and do whatever it comes to them at the moment. That is something that leaves an indelible mark, and we want to create that experience. I wanted to add a couple of things to what Rachel just said, that we are looking also not only what happens inside Lane Stadium, which is where we're planning to do the in-person events, as conditions allowing, but we're also going to be providing guidance on outside of Lane Stadium. For example, we're fairly certain that we won't be in a position to allow tailgating in our parking lots, and we'll be in a position where we have to restrict large gatherings. So just be wary of that we're going to be providing guidance, but those are two constraints that we have. And I know I'll jump ahead on one point that comes to mind immediately when we talk about the class of 2021 is, what about the class of 2020? And we're also thinking about what kind of opportunities we're going to provide for members of the class of 2020 who weren't able to do anything in person. So stay tuned on that one as well. We're aware of it, we're working on it, and we're going to try and dovetail it in a way that it works for everybody.
I appreciate you adding that, because that is something that a lot of students were asking about. students who've already graduated as part of class of 2020, making sure that they are not forgotten. President Sands and Dr. Holloway and Frank, I wanted to talk about in-person classes. You mentioned if we continue in the direction in which we are currently in, and the numbers going down, the percentages going down, having hope that there is more in-person in the fall. Can we talk about what that looks like and what it will take to get there?
I'll leave that to Dr. Holloway to kick us off.
Well, we are planning for an in-person fall, and what that means to us is that the schedule of classes that will go live next week will look like a pre-pandemic schedule. So you should see rooms assigned. You're going to see what you would have expected prior to the pandemic. So first-year students, you're going to see something slightly different than you've had this year. And so we're really working toward that. Of course, we have to always have contingency plans so that if for some reason we aren't able to fully open, we have to think about that classroom size and what we can do there. And we've always had courses that were online. So I think you'll see the full complement of courses. I think the other thing that's happened through the pandemic is that our faculty have learned new ways of doing things. So that I think you may see more what we would call a flipped class, where what would traditionally be an in-person lecture is online, and then the class time is actually used for problem solving, active learning. So I think you'll see some new things that we've learned through this, but it really is going to depend on everything that's happening around COVID and what the recommendations are around that. So some of those things we'll just be monitoring as we have this whole year to see where we are in the fall. But students, you'll be working with your advisors to build those schedules. So if you really want to have more online, you're going to have to look for that. It may change the semester order of courses, but we really are really trying to get back to what makes Virginia Tech so special, and that's gathering with your faculty in the classroom. So that's our goal.
So if we get there and that happens safely, are there options for students who may not be comfortable going back into the classroom?
I'd say that's where you really work students with your academic advisor, because we almost always have some options, but we can't be sure and we can't guarantee that every course is going to be offered in multiple modalities. So it's probably more working with your advisor to figure out the sequencing of courses if you want to be more heavily online in fall. And usually we have some flexibility around what semester you take things. So I'd ask the students to really work with their academic advisor to figure out what the best plan is for them.
And I'd like to ask, as you think about in-person fall, what does that look like in terms of the public health guidelines that will still be in place potentially, what that looks like, how you plan for that, what that means for students, particularly as some folks get vaccinated?
Mm-hmm. Well, I hate to always say this, but we don't quite know yet. So we're going to have to assess where we are, and we'll be continuing to develop guidance. We don't know yet if physical distancing, what that will need to be, if that needs to continue. I won't speak for the public health experts, but I think we need to be prepared at any point that we may have to pivot, as we've said before, based on what's happening with the pandemic. So keep your masks. Don't be throwing them away. Keep them handy. Hopefully we won't need to use them as much, but again, we may need to, because this is, as President Sands said, and I know all of us feel this, if you had told us in March 2020 that we'd be having this conversation still today, many of us would have been wrong about that. So we just have to keep moving forward. We're really hopeful. And I think we've learned a lot, and we'll continue to do that as we go through summer and into fall.
I can maybe interject that I think there's a lot of reason for optimism, but there's also some warning signs. We've been watching the case rates and what have you in the United States drop quickly in the last few weeks, but they've also plateaued and in some cases are going back up as we speak. So we don't really know what the variants are going to lead to, and we don't know if our vaccination rate is high enough to get ahead of that. So all the things that you hear about nationally or even globally are relevant to our campuses, to Virginia Tech and our communities. It's as I said, fragile right now. A lot of things to be hopeful about, but as Dr. Holloway said, we need to be flexible and able to flip into a different mode if we need to. I'm personally hopeful. I actually think we're moving along. One of the reasons that makes me feel better about it is that each day, each week, we understand COVID-19 better. We understand the science. We understand the guidelines better. The public health guidelines are gradually becoming more and more based on empirical data, not just guesses or previous pandemics, but really based on COVID-19, the variants, and things like ventilation, which you've heard a lot about from Lindsay Marr, and making sure that we manage the aerosol nature of the virus, which is something that if you'd asked us a year ago, some people like Dr. Marr were already telling us this is an aerosol conveyed virus, but we were so focused on surfaces, which I think still have to be a focus, but that was almost our exclusive focus at the beginning. You fast forward to today, we understand so much more. So I think over the summer, we're going to gain even more information. There's certainly great momentum in vaccines. We need to be, if you can get a vaccine, get it, go for it. I think the closer we are to vaccine-induced herd immunity, the better chance we have of being able to operate in a very close to normal fashion. Maybe, one thing I think would be interesting is if, Frank, you shared what you're thinking about in the residence halls and what that might look like, the dining facilities, based on what you're learning.
Sure, President Sands, and I've been using the metaphor of the lighting in a living room per se. I have the little dimmer switch in my living room, and in March it went all the way off, and we've been gradually turning the lights up. I think in the fall they're going to be really quite bright. Maybe not all the way to the top, but they're going to be quite bright. As you remember, this fall we didn't have our off-campus students able to have a meal plan. We're welcoming people to sign up for meal plans. We expect for residence halls to operate normally. We'll probably have some public health guidelines, like a public health commitment, making good decisions, wearing masks in some environments. We'll probably still have prevalence testing. We'll have quarantine and isolation facilities held. But by and large, we're going to continue pushing the lights on, and I think they're going to show up with them being quite bright and on our path towards what we remember as a pre-pandemic time. So I think student life will be vibrant and fun and all the things that we've expected. We'll still have some public health things that we're going to have to do, but it's going to be an encouraging time to be back on campus.
Frank, can you talk a little bit about what campus will look like for the student experience a little bit? I know that there are pods in place right now where students can join. Will that be something that's maintained? Will residence life look different? What kinds of things are you considering or planning for even?
Don, thank you for that question. In many ways, I think we'll see feels like a more traditional student experience. Our student organizations operating, and even now on campus, I think like President Sands and Vice Provost Holloway have said, we've learned a lot. And so our students are even able to engage in ways because they're using pods and they're using masks and social distancing in ways that there's a level of energy on campus these days. It's a lot more robust than it was in the fall semester. So I think we're going to be returning to what feels like, again, we can't predict the future. And it's why I emphasize so much that the choices we make together determine our future. And, we'll want people to be vaccinated if they can be vaccinated. We absolutely want them to be vaccinated. Getting to that herd immunity is going to help us move to the other side of this more rapidly. But I want people to realize they're going to come back and student organizations are going to be in place. And unless something changes drastically from the direction that we're on, which we never can say for sure, but that's what we're planning.
I'm curious if things that we're seeing currently that are in place, like the isolation spaces and the testing practices, will those remain?
Yeah, so we will still have isolation and quarantine facilities on campus because we do suspect that there will still be some levels of the COVID-19 virus on campus. Hopefully it is limited, but we'll also do prevalence testing so that we have a sense of what's actually going on campus. It may be, I think it's kind of like the light switch. It's going the opposite direction. It'll probably come down as we understand the prevalence is less in the environment and more people are vaccinated. So again, those things will still exist, but they'll be less so as we get on the other side of this.
I do want to talk about vaccine quite a bit because a lot of questions have come up about that. But Dr. Holloway, I wanted to ask you something while we were talking about in-person. As we plan for an in-person fall, is study abroad an option for students? Do we know that yet?
I don't know that we've made an announcement yet, but what's been happening through the course of the pandemic is we have a global travel oversight committee that makes recommendations to the president about education abroad. And so we continue to look on a rolling basis at the proposals that are coming forward from both individuals and groups that want to study abroad. Our aspiration is absolutely to have more. We have some very limited groups right now. But yes, we want to get that back to normal. But again, it's the world situation there, so how far we'll be able to go has to do with everything that's happening, not just here, but around the world. So it certainly is an aspiration. We know how transformational it is for our students. So as with Frank, I'm hopeful, and we have a lot of plans in place and a lot of careful consideration to make sure that we really are preparing and planning to keep everyone safe and well as we continue to move forward. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to do more.
Getting to vaccines, I know that in previous town halls, particularly ones that our New River Health District Director, Dr. Noel Bissell, has taken part in with you, President Sands, has talked about the health department manages vaccinations, not the university. But can you talk about, will you be able to mandate vaccines and whether students will be able to get vaccinations on campus?
We do get that question often, will we be mandating vaccines? And the reality of this situation has multiple layers. The federal government, and specifically the CDC and the FDA in this case, do not allow mandating vaccines that are on emergency use authorizations. And if you think about the logic of that, it all makes sense. Outside of the COVID pandemic, it's obvious if it's an experimental vaccine, you're not going to mandate it. But I think as experience grows, and it's growing quickly, we're hopeful that the FDA will be able to fully approve these vaccines, and then that will bump it down to the state level. And there'll be conversations, if that happens, with the Virginia Department of Health and the General Assembly about whether they're going to mandate or allow the mandating of COVID vaccines. So we're not there. We're a couple of layers away from even being able to address that question. The answer right now is we're not mandating. We're not even allowed to mandate vaccines at this point for students. I would say, though, that the vaccination process is improving almost every day. There's more and more vaccine available. It's almost, I think it's safe to say it's accelerating. And so we're very hopeful that students will have the opportunity to be vaccinated before the end of the spring semester, and that this can be done in a very organized fashion and rather quickly. So we're making plans with our local health department, and we're talking, matter of fact, on a daily basis with the Virginia Department of Health about the campus situations and making sure our students are vaccinated at the earliest possible time. It would be better if we could get that done before the end of the spring semester, then it wouldn't be ad hoc, but we're not quite there yet. Can't say for sure, but I'm pretty optimistic that by the end of this semester, we'll be able to do some sort of mass vaccination clinics for students. And so stay tuned on that. That's where the momentum's taking us. Of course, there could be all sorts of bumps along the way, but that's where we're headed.
What's the best advice for students? Is it registering through the New River NRV Road to Wellness website, or I'm sorry, it's shifted now to the state website, the VDH
Yes.
website?
Yeah, the advice we're hearing now is you should go ahead, even if you're not eligible yet, you should go ahead and register and put your name in the portal, and just so that in case there's an opportunity that comes up early, they know how to contact you. If we're able to do something kind of mass vaccination related, of course, we'll do it with the community. It won't just be for Virginia Tech, because we're embedded in the community. All of our testing, all of our work with assisting with vaccinations and public health has been done as a cooperative exercise with our community, not just isolated to campus. But I'm hopeful that we'll get to a point where we can have some control over that and be able to very efficiently give vaccines to our students and the remainder of our employees. Again, we're not quite there yet. I would recommend putting your name in the portal though as soon as possible, and just being ready in that regard. The worst thing that's going to happen there is you're going to have to tell someone when you get a call, oh, I've already been vaccinated.
Dr. Holloway, is it the same advice, same recommendation for faculty in terms of getting vaccinations?
Yes, and I think everyone that I know has not only put their name in once, but maybe twice, which I'm not sure is helpful. And yes, because it's all of us together, as Frank said, it's not just our students, it's our whole community. And I know many of us in my age group have been very worried about our own parents. And, it's all those multiple generations. I think one of the things that has given me greatest hope in recent weeks is to watch on the media and elsewhere, grandparents being able to hug their grandchildren. And I know that's really important for our students. So the more we all participate, the more the community will be safe, and we will get to come back together again. And with, the joy of walking across the drill field in the crowd, I can't wait for that to happen again. So we will get there, and we all just have to do our best to participate.
President Sands, you touched on this a minute ago, and I'm curious if you can tell us what the status of the work between the university and the town and the New River Health District, the task force work that we heard a lot about in the fall. Can you talk about where that stands now and if that relationship and that work continues?
Oh, thank you. Yes, it absolutely continues. I think it's probably one of the best things that we've done as a community is to collaborate that way. And we did it early. I think a lot of communities are looking at what was done here and are trying to duplicate it. But the fact that we started that way, that we basically said that everything we do is going to be done jointly, has made a huge difference. You've heard a lot about the testing capability that we have at our molecular diagnostics lab in Roanoke that has not just been for Virginia Tech, it's been for the entire community, and it's part of a statewide network. And so they've done over 100,000 tests. I don't know the exact number right now. I guess it's pushing 130,000 or something like that. And yes, a lot of them have been on campus, but many of them have been for the health districts in the region. We take that same philosophy with communications. You shouldn't see different guidance when you cross Main Street. It's the same guidance. And we also, we recognize that our communities are linked, even though we have different pools of individuals who may have limited interaction with each other. They don't have zero interaction with each other. And we really have to take responsibility, as Frank said, that every group of every demographic has to be responsible for the others. And I think that's been a great success for us. We have had, of course, occasions where, and we just alluded to some from yesterday, that where we've seen, I would say, very concerning behaviors that are understandable. I mean, it's hard to stay cooped up for a year, but we have to be really careful there, because it's only going to take one of those that gets out of control from a viral standpoint to set us back 3 months. It can happen really quickly. And frankly, we've been pretty lucky so far. We've had individual outbreaks associated with or individual events that have led to many cases at different times during the pandemic. And none of those have really gotten out of control. It's been hard, maybe twice, beginning of the fall and a couple of weeks into the spring semester, where we had multiple events that led to a influx of cases that were difficult to manage. I mean, I won't lie and say it's been smooth. There have been a couple of times when our afternoon briefing that we have several times a week, and Dr. Shushok is in those briefings, where we've really been on the edge. Are we going to have to do something to change the way we've operated? I'm very proud of the fact that we have not had a shutdown. This academic year, we've not had a shelter in place or a lockdown or whatever you want to call it, because I think our systems have been resilient enough and flexible enough to accommodate excursions in terms of the number of cases in quarantine and isolation. But it's been close. We've got there've been, and Dr. Shushok shaking his head, because we've had some times when we've been 5 minutes away or an hour away from saying, okay, that's it, we got to change direction. But we've hung in there and we've done it. We need to keep that up, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't take much. It's just one big event, and then pretty soon we're back where we were a few months ago. So I don't want to, I have to emphasize that the majority of our population, both on campus and in the community, has been very protective of the community and good about most of our public health guidelines. I wouldn't trade this community for any other in that respect, but we have to remain vigilant.
Dr. Shushok, we've talked a lot before about student health and well-being and all of the effort that has been put in on campus before the pandemic, even in terms of making sure that students are well taken care of. Yesterday was a wellness day. Can you talk a little bit about how our students are doing and what's been helping, or what more could be done, what you're learning?
Well, the first thing I would say is, we know beyond of a shadow of doubt that this has been incredibly corrosive on student well-being. This has been terribly difficult on all people, but our students particularly have suffered mightily because of the pandemic and a number of conditions. And so, the first thing I want to say is, please take care of yourself. Please get the support that you need. We've got great resources at Virginia Tech. And if there's anything you need and you don't know how to get the help, you don't hear anything else, I just want you to pick up the phone or send an email to the Dean of Students office and say, I need support. Whatever that support is, we will find our way to get you the kind of support that you need. With that, I'd also like to mention that I think for humans, this has been a long year, and it's a bit of a traumatic experience, and the human body does a great job of kind of flattening out our response, because it helps us get through. So it won't surprise me too that some people are going to feel some anxiety coming out of, as things begin opening up, and we're used to a way of life now that we've been in for a year now, and there's going to be some reticence, some mixed feelings as things become more like we used to know them. So all that to say is, people are going to be at different places on this all the time, and it has been that way through the pandemic. The other time, sometimes people are really anxious, and their colleagues aren't, and then they trade places 2 weeks later. So the key is, however you're feeling is okay, and to pay attention to that, and to get support, and to know that it's very normal to feel a variety of often conflicting emotions during this time. We have great people to help you. The wellness days, it's just a day to pause and to breathe and to get out of your routine. We all know how hard it is to look at a computer screen all day. And for those of you who live in Blacksburg, it's a beautiful place in the spring, couldn't be more beautiful. So we want you to get out of your routine, go do something that gives you a little life and energy so that you can persevere through this a little longer. But take care of yourself. Your well-being has been jeopardized, and for obvious reasons. And that's going to need you to have your own strategic plan to come out and to help yourself be your best healthy self.
And there are, if you can share for some students who may not have seen or heard, some options available to help students on campus or do activities or fun things. There's been a lot of attention focus on creating opportunities to let folks gather safely in that way.
Well, just a quick example. If anyone had a chance yesterday, there was an ice skating rink in the Prairie Quad yesterday. You signed up for slots, but it was nice to go out there and see so many students having fun. I know that a number of students have enjoyed watching some of our baseball team victories. The drill field has been populated mightily with pods of people who are in the formal pod program. Cook counseling and our Hokie recovery program, lots of groups for people who want to participate in group interventions or programs. So there's lots of things. If you go to Gobbler Connect, you can look on there every day and you can see a ton of events and activities and ways to get involved, some in person, plenty virtually. But then just this environment that we're in, there's lots to connect with.
Thank you. Dr. Holloway, if I can turn to you sort of with a similar question, but in terms of academics and what you're seeing and how our students are finding success through this shift in how it's normally done.
Well, I want to echo Frank's statements. We know it's been a change, and it has differential feeling for students. Some students have really liked the online environment. Others find it really challenging. And I do think we're all a little fatigued of screen time. And so finding ways to step away from the screen, I think, is important to academic success too. But as students are navigating the semester, we're at that point in the semester where we finish sort of the first round of assignments, and now our students are looking toward what's left in the semester. And this is a really good time as you meet with your academic advisor. You may want to seek out your faculty, make sure you know exactly where you stand in your courses, and then seek advice. If you're seeking to improve, ask your faculty member or the graduate teaching assistant about resources. Sometimes they can help you just tweak something in your studying that makes all the difference. The Student Success Center is there for students all the time around academic support. There's peer academic coaching, there's mentoring, we have tutoring, we have group tutoring. One thing I want to say to students, I've heard it every year I've been at Virginia Tech. Students will get to about this point in the semester and they say, I'm the only one struggling with, and then they fill in the class. And I'm here to tell you, you are not the only one. right? And there are many people who can help you figure out how to change things just a little bit. And so reach out to those resources. And again, if there's something beyond your academics that's really impacting your ability to do well in class, the dean of students can help with the whole piece. They can help you reach to an advisor. They can connect you with other resources on campus. And all of our offices are open. Career and professional development is open virtually. So don't think that those resources aren't still there. They are. And your advisor, the dean of students, can help you get there, or your faculty. And so the other thing I'd say, we just passed a break day. And I would say this in any semester. You now know when the next break day is. And I would encourage you to start there, look back and figure out what work you have to do. And then plan for that time away from the screen. Plan time to do your workout, plan time to spend with a group. I know a lot of students feel like they feel trapped. And I think one way to work on that is to build a plan to make sure you're counteracting that. You know, one thing I know will start happening soon, because I can't wait for it. As the weather warms up, start using our outdoor spaces, not just socially, but to study. You know, find one of those spots. You don't necessarily have to be online. Take your computer and work on homework out in the sunshine. I mean, just that change in location away from a desk can make all the difference. So if you're not sure how to do that, reach out to the Student Success Center. They'll help you on time management or planning or studying. Any way we can help you, because honestly, we want every student to succeed, even through this really challenging time. You are building skills and abilities that are going to support you through the rest of your time as a student and beyond. So let us help you if you're feeling like you're struggling.
Thank you. I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity before we closed out to share any final thoughts or encouragement or advice. Dr. Holloway, I'll give you a little bit of a break. Dr. Shushok, would you like to go first?
Oh, I just, there's, I have found myself at this point with a deep sense of gratitude on so many levels. A gratitude that I get to work with such extraordinary students at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech students really are extraordinary. I'm so grateful for all the sacrifices of our faculty and staff. And I work with, also in student affairs, I work with housekeepers and dining services workers and our residential life coordinators who have never left campus, who have given everything they possibly can because they care about the success of every student. And I want to just conclude by saying, to emphasize what Dr. Holloway just said, is I really have a lot of faith that doing this very hard thing that we have done is building a kind of strength that is going to pay enormous dividends, particularly in the kind of difference our students are going to make out in the world after they graduate from Virginia Tech. So I know it's been hard. Hard things build strength, and we're going to see the benefit of it. So hang in there. Hang in there. It's the fourth quarter. Don't lose the lead. Go for the win, and we'll be there before we know it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's baseball season. Dr. Holloway.
So does that mean we're in the 8th inning or the 9th inning? That's, I'll get confused in my sports metaphors. I just really want to echo what Frank has said, and also for the students listening, for the faculty listening, for all our staff who are supporting our advisors, everyone who is figuring out how to do our work through this unprecedented time. That's a word we've said probably too many times this last year. The one thing we know is that when people get together in that relationship, really focused on learning and the joy of being on a campus, great things happen, whether you're in person or you're online. And so I think continuing to forge those relationships, communicate well with each other, let your faculty know things that are working well. And faculty are reaching out to students to try to better understand how they can support them. I think it's that communication of what we're doing as a community to continue to make Virginia Tech the very special place it is. And I think we're all committed to that. And we are going to stay strong and continue through this semester. You know, I can't wait till we get to that last day and we can celebrate how much we've accomplished together. So that's my hope for the rest of the spring term.
Thank you. I appreciate it. President Sands.
Thank you. I really love the sports metaphors. I'll stay away from them, but I think they're apt. My feeling about what we need to do in the next several weeks and months, and what characteristics and approaches we need to take, all revolve around patience. I think it's hard because we've been through a lot, and everybody's anxious to get back to normal, and everybody's looking for, well, if they say if I do this, I'll be okay, or whatever. Oh, I don't think the guidance, I think we can jump the guidance. I know where it's headed. That's what gets us in trouble. And I think just reflecting on the fact that that in about 3 months, we're going to look back and say, we're glad that we stuck to it, that we didn't sort of drop our guard too early, because the next couple of months will go by quickly, just like the year has, well, in some ways it's gone by quickly. In some ways it seems like a decade, but the reality is it's moving quickly. One of the questions I get pretty often is, well, if I'm vaccinated, can't I do this and that? And the answer is just wait for the guidance to come out. It will come out from the CDC or from our Virginia Department of Health, and it will be well backed up, not only by data, but by experience. And, for example, one of the questions we're getting quite a bit is, if I've been vaccinated, why do I have to go through prevalence testing? And I just use that as an example. I don't want to go deep into that, but it's an example of, okay, well, that's what we're doing now. That is the guidance. We're learning from it. Part of the reasons we don't relax on that point is that we are still a little bit nervous about the variants, and we're still a little bit nervous about the long-term effectiveness of the vaccines. So yes, we will continue doing prevalence testing even after people are vaccinated, until we have enough evidence that comes from the CDC and the Virginia Department of Health that tells us we don't have to do that anymore. So I say that to myself too. I love to look at these things. Well, if I do this, shouldn't I be able to do that? And just wait for the wisdom to come from the public health experts, and we'll get through this faster. So I also just like to finish by echoing something that both Dr. Holloway and Dr. Shushok said, and that's thanks to our students, to our faculty, to our staff. We are where we are today because of incredible efforts that everyone's made. And I'm just amazed at how many people, especially our frontline folks, the people who are in direct contact with COVID-19, with the pandemic, essentially in campus and on campus and in our community, that they have stayed with us and worked so hard to ensure that we get around this corner and that we do so successfully. And it has been inspiring, to be honest, to see how many of our employees and staff and students have really just said, okay, I'm sacrificing my experience. I'm going to make sure everybody else is safe. So I appreciate that, and we'll have a chance to celebrate that later. Not right now, but later.
I think we're all looking forward to that. Thank you, President Sands. Thank all of you for taking the time to answer so many questions today. Dr. Holloway, Dr. Shushok, and President Sands, thank you again.
And go Hokies. We've got the men and the women playing basketball this weekend, and then the wrestling tournaments going on as we speak.
Great reminder. Have a good afternoon.